The last time I was in Michael's, they had an entire aisle dedicated to sunflower decorations, which I love because I think it's a great way to transition your home from summer into fall. Hey everyone, thanks for coming to hang out with me today. I'm really excited about these crafts. By the way, my name's Jess. I'm really excited. I hope you are too. Let's get started.
I had been keeping my eye out for these galvanized wall vases from the Dollar Tree, and I was really excited when my store finally got them in. I wanted to jazz it up a little bit so that I could add some sunflowers to it to brighten up my home's decor. In addition to the wall vase, I'm using some of these super jumbo craft sticks from Walmart, a little bit of ribbon, and of course some sunflowers. I started by taking a measurement on the side of the wall vase. I measured in between the two lips that ran around the vase, and it measured about 1 7/8 of an inch. Then I took out one of my favorite craft room tools, my paper trimmer, and I started cutting these craft sticks down to that size. Also, just a word of warning, I had a bugger of a time getting the sticker off of the front of this wall vase. I had to use my heat gun, I had to use a scraper tool, and then even after I got all the paper off, there was so much sticky residue on the front that I had to use some rubbing alcohol on the front to get the rest of that residue off. So just a fair warning, and if you are going to use a heat gun to get your label off, just be really careful because that metal heats up really fast. Now that my wall vase is nice and cleaned up, I took the craft sticks that I had cut apart and I just started hot gluing them around the outside. I glued the first one down over the seam in the container, and that was towards the bottom, so it did lift it up more than the other craft sticks, but you couldn't really tell. And I got really lucky because when I got to the end, I didn't have to cut any of the craft sticks lengthwise to fit on there. I was able to leave just a tiny little gap, and they all fit around the outside perfectly. I like the natural color of the craft sticks, but if that isn't your style, you could always paint or stain those. I would just recommend doing that before you glue them around the outside. I also decided to take out the jute rope that they had in the hanger, and I replaced it with some of this black and white gingham ribbon. I filled the inside of the pocket with some smaller pieces of floral foam, and then I just started going to town adding in my favorite pieces of greenery and some of the new fall picks that I found at the Dollar Tree, and of course some sunflowers. Now I wanted some of my florals and flowers to hang down over the front, so that's why I chose not to decorate the front pocket of this wall vase. But if you want to just stick in tiny flowers that poke up through the pocket, I would say you could decorate the front with some stickers or even some really cute window clings. That would be an easy way. I think the window clings would stick right to it. You wouldn't have to Mod Podge them down, or you could just glue on some more flowers or even a big bow. I'm always trying to come up with new twists or spins for wood bead garlands because I love using them so much in my decor. I found this really cool pack of black and white buffalo plaid wood beads on Amazon. I'll make sure that they're linked below. And I also grabbed some just plain wood beads and these mini sunflowers. I wanted to get all of the wood beads strung on before I started adding in the sunflowers. Anytime I'm stringing beads onto jute, I always like to add a dab of hot glue to the end, let it cool for a few seconds, and then roll it in between my fingers. And it makes it a lot easier to string it through the beads. I started by taking 3 of the regular wooden beads, then I added a black bead, a buffalo plaid bead, and another black bead, and then another 3 beads. So that's the pattern that I'm going to continue with the whole way down the length of the garland. I didn't tie off either end of the garland yet because I needed some slack so that I could slide the beads around to add my sunflowers. I clipped one of the mini sunflowers as close as I could to the little plastic part, and then I added some hot glue to reinforce the plastic backing that was on it. I placed it underneath the jute cord in between the 2 sets of wooden beads, and then I added a leaf on the back. That way it gave it more of a finished look. If the garland flipped around and you saw the back side of it, you would just see the leaf, but from the front side it has a cute little sunflower in between the sets of wooden beads. To finish off my wood bead garland, I decided to create some simple jute twine tassels. I always like to use my sanding block. I think it's a good size to make tassels for garlands. I wrap the jute around about 20 times. I tie it in the center with the end of the garland. Instead of using a second piece of jute, I just strung the end of the garland through there and tied it on. That way it was tying off the end of the garland and also tying it onto the garland in one step. Once I had it tied onto the garland, I just had to snip the back side of the sanding block to get all the fringy pieces off, and then about an inch down from the top I tied another piece of jute cord and I finished it off with a piece of black and white gingham ribbon. One of my favorite things that I saw in the sunflower aisle at Michael's was this sunflower and newsprint piece of artwork, and I decided to recreate it for myself. I grabbed one of these frames from the Dollar Tree. I love it whenever they have these in stock. I always grab quite a few. I love the size and the shape of it, and I really like that the frame itself has a wood grain pattern on it because it just makes my life a little easier. In addition to one of those frames, I also created a free printable. I'll have this linked in the description box as a Google Doc, and you're welcome to print it out for yourself. And I'll be using some of the Distress ink by Tim Holtz. I sized this printable to fit in this frame specifically, so if you didn't want to go through some of the other things I'm going to go through, you could actually just cut it out and stick it right inside the frame. I do like more of a distressed look, so I decided to tear along the edges of the printable for inside my frame. And one tip I have is, whenever you're using cardstock like that and you're ripping the paper, if you rip it towards you, you'll create a little bit of a white border around the edge. So whenever you ink over it, then the ink will really soak up onto that white paper that's exposed from when you tore. If you would tear the paper away from yourself, you won't get that white showing through. Once I had the paper tore down to the size that I liked, I grabbed the walnut stain color by Tim Holtz in this Distress ink, and I'm using one of these foam ink daubers. I found these at Michael's. I think you can get them at most craft stores like Hobby Lobby and whatnot. I just like to rub the foam over the ink pad, and then I take it in circles and I go around the edges. That way it gives it an aged look, and like I said, where I ripped the paper and that raw white cardstock is exposed, the ink will soak right onto it nicely. I popped the back out of this frame and I covered it with a piece of white cardstock. I just used some double-sided tape. The only reason I did that is because the bottom word on this was a little wide and some of the letters stuck out from behind the printable after I had tore it down. And instead of just sticking the printable right on, I decided to give it just a little more dimension. So I added some foam tape to the back of it. They do sell foam tape at the Dollar Tree as well. And it popped it up just enough. And this was probably one of my favorite crafts that I created, and it took less than 5 minutes. Another fun way to add some sunflowers to your home decor is by creating a felt sunflower. I grabbed a piece of brown felt, 2 different shades of yellow, and a piece of green felt. And I also decided to put a pin back on mine. That way, if I didn't want to add it to any home decor, I could pin it to my jacket. For the center of the sunflower, I cut 1 piece of brown down to 2 inches in width, and the length on the felt sheet itself is 9 inches, so that piece is 9 by 2. And then for the green, I cut a piece down to 1 inch, so that piece is 1 inch by 9 inches. For the brown piece, I ran a bead of hot glue along one edge and I folded it over and lined the other edge up with the first edge so it created a loop. Then I took my scissors and I started from the folded edge and I started cutting really tiny snips. I would say probably 1/8 of an inch, and I made sure that I stayed about 1/4 of an inch away from the other end. And I did that along the whole length of this strip. For the green one, I didn't fold it in half. I just cut the little fringy pieces the same way, but this way it was just going to be one piece instead of folded in half like the brown was. I cut off a piece of a stem from a floral pick where I had used the flower, but I didn't use the stem. I added some hot glue to one end of the brown piece that I had created, and I glued it onto the stem. Then I continued to add hot glue along the bottom edge of the brown piece and rolling the rest of the flower up on itself. And I rolled it the entire length of this brown piece. As I was rolling up, I just made sure that the bottom edge always stayed lined up on itself. That way it created a wider piece rather than rolling down onto the stem, if that makes any sense. You'll see here, once I get to the end, all of the bottom edges are lined up, and then it created a nice wide center for my sunflower. Once I had the brown piece all rolled around that floral stem, then I took my green piece and I rolled it just once around the outside of the brown. So I didn't actually need the entire length of that felt piece, but that was fine because it gave me enough to make another sunflower. And you can see here, rather than continuing to roll around like I did with the brown piece, I only did one layer of the green because sunflowers kind of have that little pop of green that comes out around the edge of the center part where all the seeds are. For the sunflower petals themselves, I'm taking the two shades of yellow that I had, and again, I'm using the 9-inch length that it comes in, but these strips I'm cutting to 2.5 inches in width. And I did that with both of the colors. I cut 2 strips of each color to give me enough petals to go the whole way around the outside of the flowers. I decided to freehand the petals rather than using a pattern. They're pretty simple to make. I cut a curve on one edge of the strip, and then I moved over about 1/2 inch and I cut a curve going in the opposite direction. Then I cut a slit right in the center. I added a dab of hot glue and I crossed one side over the other, and that will help the petal itself actually curve in on itself. So the reason I cut the strips to 2.5 inches wide is because that kind of gave me a guide to keep all of the petals uniform, because I just made sure that I was cutting from the very bottom and I went to the very top. So even though the width of the petals is a little different and the shapes are slightly different, the length of the petals is going to be the same. And I think it looks a little cuter that way when the petals are slightly different from each other, because if you look at a sunflower out in nature, none of the petals are going to look exactly the same. After my petals were cut out, then I could start gluing them to the center of the sunflower. And again, I made sure that when I glued them on, that everything on the bottom lined up. So you can see that the bottom of the sunflower petal lined up with where the brown and the green felt rolled up together, so everything was even on the bottom. After I had all of the first layer of the lighter color of yellow petals on, then I went back through and I glued on the second layer, which was the darker shade of yellow, and I made sure that I staggered the petals so that you could see the darker yellow sticking out from in between the lighter yellow. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I decided to add a pin back to my sunflower because I wanted to be able to use it in a couple different ways. If you know you're just going to be adding this to a wreath or a flower arrangement, you could leave the stem in place just how it is. But for mine, I decided to cut off the stem so that I could add another piece of felt to glue my pin back to. I still have a few more fun crafts to show you, but if you are liking these sunflower projects, make sure you show me by giving this video a big thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and if you're on social media, I am on Instagram at gluelalacrafts. Now let's get back to crafting. The Dollar Tree's website has all of this sunflower dinnerware, but my store never got any of this in, so I decided to create some on my own, including a really quick and easy sunflower centerpiece. For the centerpiece, I grabbed one of these trays that they always have at the Dollar Tree. They're usually in the dinnerware section. And then for the place setting itself, I grabbed one of these chargers. I thought these were really cute. I liked that it looked like the sun. I took them both outside and I gave them each 2 coats of this spray paint by Rust-Oleum. It has an ultra matte finish and the color is called Perfect Gray. After my paint had dried, I got to work on the centerpiece, and this is a really quick and easy centerpiece, so keep this in mind if you have a bridal shower or a wedding to get ready for. I cut a piece of floral foam down to about the same width as one of the battery-operated pillar candles that you can get at the Dollar Tree. I made sure that the top was nice and flat so the candle wouldn't lean when I set it on there. Then I gathered up a bunch of my favorite greeneries and floral picks, including, of course, sunflowers, because that's the theme of the day. I started arranging a bunch of the greenery by poking it into the foam base itself. I didn't glue anything into place. That way, if I need to, I can switch it out for the different holidays. Once I had all the greenery filled in around the foam block, then I tucked in my sunflowers and I just set my pillar candle on top. I found these really pretty sunflower window clings on Amazon that I thought would be perfect to decorate my charger. I started by laying some of them out. I put them more towards the bottom of the charger. I layered some of them on top of each other, and then once I had it arranged how I like it, I used my phone and I took a picture of it so that I could remember it. Then I peeled everything back off so that I could glue everything in place with some Mod Podge. So you can see I just keep my phone next to me there. That way I can refer back to it so I know which window cling to place where and which thing needs to be layered on top of the other. Window clings are also a great way to dress up any type of glass. I went to the Dollar Tree and I grabbed one of these really cute mason jar drinking glasses. I added a few of the sunflower window clings to the glass. I didn't bother Mod Podging it on, that way I could take them off and wash the glass a little bit easier. I tied a piece of that black and white gingham ribbon around the handle of the mug and I hot glued a mini sunflower just to the ribbon so that it could be removed later for washing. Of course, no place setting is complete without a fun napkin ring. I gathered up a few supplies from the Dollar Tree, including one of their chopping mats, this soft microfiber car wash cloth, and of course some sunflowers and ribbon. I cut a piece of the chopping mat down to about 1.5 inches wide. I rolled it up till it looked like it was the right size for a napkin ring and I cut the excess off. I forgot to take a measurement of how long it is, but if I had to guess, I would say it was probably about 6 or 7 inches in length. Next, I cut out a piece of that microfiber cloth so that I could wrap it around the piece of chopping mat. I hot glued the piece of chopping mat to the center of the piece of the car wash cloth. Then I folded each end over and secured it in place with more hot glue. Once the cloth was all glued down, I rolled it back up, adding more hot glue to one end and overlapping them both. Then I held it in place with a clip until that hot glue had a chance to set. I cut a few small lengths of this black and white gingham ribbon and I made sure that I dovetailed the ends. I laid them in an X pattern over the seam on the napkin ring and then I just hot glued a few leaves and a few sunflowers on top. The last thing I wanted to create for my place setting was a little favor that my guests could take home with them. I got these wood slices from Amazon. They're made by Arteza. I'll make sure that they're linked in the description box below. The one sunflower on this window cling fit pretty perfectly inside the center of this window cling. I applied a little Mod Podge onto the wood and added the window cling. Then I used my paint pen to write the year at the bottom so that they would remember when I had this awesome sunflower party. I added some jute string through the top of the wood slice because they already had a hole drilled in the top for me, and I added another piece of that black and white gingham ribbon. Thanks for hanging out and crafting with me today. I hope you enjoyed all of these bright and cheery sunflower projects. I left some videos on the screen that I think you might like. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye!